What if the only home you knew rejected you for the love you couldn't hide? What if the people who raised you chose fear over family the moment you spoke your truth? And what if that painful exile was the spark that ignited a fire within you to return not as the boy they broke, but as the man who would redefine everything? I still remember the exact afternoon the world I knew ended. The sun was beating down on the quiet streets of Rockford, Illinois, turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze. I was 22, fresh out of community college, working at my father's hardware store like every other guy in the family for 3 generations. Jonathan Miller, the reliable son, the one who mowed lawns on weekends and never missed Sunday dinner. My mother had just set the table with her usual pot roast when I finally said the words that had been burning inside me for years. "Mom, Dad, I'm gay." The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was the kind that swallows sound. My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the tablecloth. Then came the storm. My father's voice rose like thunder. "Not under my roof. Not in this house. Not in this town." He didn't yell the slurs I had feared. He simply pointed at the door and said, "Pack your things tonight. You're gone by morning." My mother cried, but she didn't argue. She had always followed his lead. That night I stuffed clothes, a few books, and the only photo I had of my grandfather into a duffel bag. I stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom one last time, staring at the posters of baseball players and the faded map of the United States I had pinned up when I was 12, dreaming of somewhere bigger. Rockford had never felt small until that moment. I walked out into the cool night air, the screen door slamming behind me like a judge's gavel. I drove east on I-90 with the windows down, letting the wind whip tears from my eyes. Chicago was only 90 minutes away, but it might as well have been another planet. I had $53 in my wallet, a half tank of gas, and no plan except survival. By the time the skyline rose like a promise against the pink dawn, my stomach was knotted with fear and something sharper, hope. I parked near a shelter I had looked up on my phone, stood in line with men who looked as lost as I felt, and told myself this was temporary. The first week was a blur of soup kitchens and Craigslist gigs. I slept on a cot that smelled of bleach and regret. During the day I hauled boxes at a warehouse in the South Loop, my back aching, my mind racing. Every night I lay awake replaying my father's face, wondering if he would ever speak to me again. I missed my little sister Emily's laugh, the way she used to tease me about my terrible pancakes. But mostly I missed the version of myself I had been pretending to be. By the end of the second week, I landed a job at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. The owner, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, took one look at my exhausted eyes and said, "Kid, you look like you need this more than I need help." She paid under the table at first, let me crash in the storage room until I found a roommate. I learned to steam milk without burning my fingers and to smile at customers even when my chest felt hollow. Then one rainy Thursday, a tall guy with messy dark hair and kind hazel eyes walked in. He ordered a flat white and left a $5 tip with a note scribbled on the sleeve. "You look like you could use a friend. Nicholas." I didn't text him that night. I was still too raw. But something in the way he had looked at me, without pity, without judgment, stayed with me. I didn't know it then, but that single cup of coffee was the first thread in a tapestry I would spend the next decade weaving. Rockford had thrown me out because I loved men. Chicago was about to teach me how to love myself. The months blurred into seasons. I moved into a cramped apartment in Uptown with 2 other guys who worked odd jobs and never asked too many questions. My days started at 5 a.m., making lattes, and ended at 10 p.m. Studying for the GED I had never finished. Carla promoted me to shift supervisor after 3 months, which meant actual health insurance and enough money to buy my first winter coat that didn't have holes. I started volunteering at a youth center on Halsted Street, the kind of place that kept the lights on late for kids who had nowhere else to go. One evening, a 16-year-old boy named Marcus sat across from me in the group's circle and whispered, "My dad said if I ever came out he'd kick me out like you." His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't have fancy advice, just the truth. "It hurts like hell," I told him. "But it also makes you stronger than they'll ever understand." That night, I cried in the alley behind the center, not for Marcus, but for the boy I had been at 16 who had been too scared to even say the word gay out loud. Nicholas kept coming back to the coffee shop. He was a graphic designer working freelance from a tiny studio in Logan Square. We started talking, first about the weather, then about books, then about the things that kept us awake at night. He told me his parents had accepted him when he came out at 17, but his older brother still refused to speak to him. "Some people need time," he said quietly. "Others never find it." One freezing January night, he invited me to a gallery opening in Wicker Park. I wore the only button-down I owned and felt underdressed next to the crowd in designer jeans. Nicholas introduced me to his friends as Jonathan, the guy who makes the best oat milk latte in Chicago. When the lights dimmed and the music swelled, he leaned close and said, "I'm glad you're here." That was the first time someone looked at me like I belonged somewhere. We walked along the river after the show, breath fogging in the cold air. He didn't push, didn't ask for anything. He just listened when I finally told him about Rockford, about the slammed door, about the way my mother's last hug had felt like goodbye forever. When I finished, he stopped under a street lamp and said, "You didn't lose a family. You lost a version of one that couldn't handle the real you. The real one is still out there waiting." I kissed him that night on the bridge, snowflakes catching in his hair. It wasn't fireworks or movie magic. It was quiet, certain, and terrifying in the best way. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just becoming. 2 years passed like pages turning in a book I couldn't put down. Nicholas and I moved in together above a taqueria in Pilsen. The apartment smelled of cilantro and paint because he turned the living room into a studio. I enrolled at DePaul University part-time, studying business administration because I had this wild idea that one day I might build something of my own. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We argued about money when my student loans piled up. We fought when I worked double shifts and came home too tired to talk. But every fight ended the same way. Nicholas pulling me close and reminding me, "We're in this together." He taught me how to cook real Mexican food and how to let someone love me without waiting for the other shoe to drop. I taught him how to slow down and breathe when deadlines crushed him. Then came the call I had both dreaded and secretly hoped for. My sister Emily's voice on the phone after 3 years of silence. "Dad's sick, Jonathan. Really sick. Mom keeps asking about you when she thinks I'm not listening." I sat on the fire escape for an hour after we hung up, Nicholas's hand steady on my back. "You don't have to go," he said. "But if you do, I'm coming with you." I didn't go. Not yet. Instead, I threw myself into my studies and into a new job at a small marketing firm downtown. My boss noticed how quickly I learned and gave me my first real project, rebranding a local nonprofit that helped LGBTQ youth. The campaign won an award. For the first time, people were paying me to tell stories like mine. Nicholas proposed on a random Tuesday in June. We were on the rooftop of our building watching the fireworks from Navy Pier. He got down on one knee with a simple silver band he had designed himself. "I don't need a big wedding or a perfect life," he said. "I just need you, every version of you, forever." I said yes before the last firework faded. That summer we adopted a rescue dog we named Atlas because he carried our hearts wherever we went. Life felt full in a way I had never imagined possible back in Rockford. But deep down I knew the past wasn't finished with me. Some nights I still dreamed of my father's face at that dinner table, and I woke up with the taste of exile on my tongue. By the time I turned 28, the boy who had been kicked out of Rockford existed only in old photographs. I was now Jonathan Miller, account director at a growing agency, speaking at panels about inclusive marketing. Nicholas's freelance work had exploded. His designs were in galleries from Chicago to New York. We bought a small condo in Andersonville with a backyard big enough for Atlas to chase squirrels. Then the email arrived. The subject line read, "Rockford Chamber of Commerce, Community Leader Award." They wanted to honor local success stories at their annual gala. My name was on the shortlist because of the nonprofit campaign I had led. The invitation included a handwritten note from the mayor. "We'd be honored if you could return and share your journey." I stared at the screen for a long time. Nicholas read it over my shoulder and said nothing at first. Then he asked, "Do you want to go?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to delete the email and pretend Rockford no longer existed. Another part, the part that had grown stronger every year, wanted to stand in that same town square and show them I had survived. We talked about it for weeks. Nicholas never pressured me. He simply reminded me, "Whatever you choose, I'll be right beside you." In the end, I said yes. Not for revenge, not even for closure. I said yes because I wanted the kid I used to be, the one hiding in his bedroom, to know that running away had been the bravest thing he ever did. I flew back alone first to scout the territory. The drive from Chicago felt shorter than I remembered. When I pulled into Rockford, the hardware store was still there, freshly painted. My father's truck sat in the same spot. I didn't stop. I drove straight to the hotel and spent the night staring at the ceiling, heart hammering like it had the night I left. The next morning, I met the chamber committee. They treated me like a returning hero, completely unaware that 10 years earlier they would have crossed the street to avoid me. I smiled, shook hands, and inside I felt the old anger rise and then settle. I wasn't that scared boy anymore. I was the man who had built a life they couldn't even imagine. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in string lights and nervous energy. I wore the navy suit Nicholas had helped me pick out. He stood beside me in the mirror adjusting my tie and said, "You look like the guy who's about to change everything." We drove to the venue together, my parents' old church hall, now decorated with balloons and a banner that read, "Celebrating Local Excellence." When they called my name, the applause was polite at first. Then I stepped to the podium and began to speak. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them about the night my father asked me to leave. I told them about sleeping in shelters and learning to make coffee at 5 a.m. I told them about Nicholas, about the love that had saved me when I thought nothing could. The room grew so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother was in the third row. She cried openly. My father sat beside her, face unreadable. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People I hadn't seen since high school came up to hug me. The mayor offered me the key to the city on the spot. But the real moment came later, outside under the stars. My mother approached first. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan," she whispered. I was scared. We both were. My father hung back until the crowd thinned. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders bent by illness. "Son," he said, voice rough, "I don't know how to fix what I broke. But I'm proud of the man you became." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't a hug. But it was something. Enough for now. Nicholas waited patiently by the car. When I walked over, he pulled me into his arms and said, "You did it." I realized then that returning wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving to myself that the door they slammed could become the one I walked back through on my own terms. 6 months later, we moved back to Rockford, not because we had to, but because we chose to. I opened a small marketing firm focused on helping local businesses tell inclusive stories. Nicholas set up a studio downtown where he taught art classes to LGBTQ youth. Atlas loved the bigger yard. Emily got married and asked me to walk her down the aisle. My mother started coming over for Sunday brunch. My father and I still took things slow, one awkward conversation at a time, but he showed up to the firm's grand opening and shook my hand in front of everyone. The town that once cast me out now celebrated me. The local paper ran a feature. From exile to entrepreneur. Kids at the youth center I helped fund wore t-shirts with my story printed on the back. Nicholas and I got legally married in the same park where I had once cried alone as a teenager. This time the whole town was invited. Looking back, I see the thread running through every year. The night I left wasn't the end. It was the beginning of becoming the man I was always meant to be. Love didn't erase the pain, but it gave it purpose. Every scar became a story I could tell so other kids wouldn't have to carry theirs alone. Today I stand on the rooftop of our new house overlooking the city that once rejected me. Nicholas's hand is warm in mine. Atlas is chasing fireflies in the grass below. And I finally understand. Sometimes the place that hurts you the most is the one that teaches you how to heal the loudest. From this story, I learned that rejection doesn't define you. How you rise after it does. Families can break and still find ways to mend if both sides choose courage over comfort. The greatest strength isn't never falling. It's standing up each time with more love in your heart than fear. If you're carrying a truth that feels too heavy, know this. The road away from home might be the exact path that leads you back to yourself. Keep going. The version of you waiting on the other side is worth every mile.